Why do you binge eat so much? I would ask myself this question a lot because I would eat a ton of food. Even when I wasn't hungry, I would gorge on it, and then I would feel ashamed for eating so much food, and I would hide that from everybody else. So why do we binge eat? Let's talk about that today. So I want you to focus in and let's get started. Jumbo, my friend, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're back. If it's your first time, this is What the Fuss. It's my podcast where I talk about both mentality and physicality when it comes to doing the things that you actually want to do. I am Zoe, or the Coach Zoe you know, and I want to talk to you about an experience that I've had with binge eating. Now, it's not just one solo experience. It's really something that has been multiple times in my past, and I've worked it out to figure out how to actually deal with it. But I think it's something that people don't really talk about that much, unless you're with a close friend or a family member who might understand that situation. You might not talk with somebody when you're discussing things about binge eating and eating an enormous amount of food. So we're gonna break down some of the reasons for binge eating. We're gonna talk about the difference between binge eating and just overeating. And then we're gonna talk about some of the ways that I was able to cope with it and able to figure it out. Now, I want you guys to know it's not something that really defines you. It's just something that kind of happens to you. You don't have to be stuck in a state of binge eating. You really just need to figure out the ways that you're able to cope with it if it has been something that has come across the path in your life. So what are some of these reasons for binge eating? I mean, a few of them that I could think of right off would be boredom. It could be because you're sad or you have a moment where you're depressed, or it could be some moment, situation, day where you have high anxiety. There's different reasons when the body starts to freak out that it tends to gorge on a lot of food because it's something that's comfortable. It's something hormonally that kind of changes us as we tend to eat these usually salty or very sweet kind of carb, fat-rich foods. We tend to get some type of immediate pleasure out of them, right? And for whatever type of boredom, if we're not doing anything and we take all those in, or if we feel sad about something, it might make us feel better. Or if we're really anxious about something that we're doing that's new, or we have a bunch of nervousness going on and we want to kind of eat a bunch of food because it makes us feel better. That was some of the reasons that I did it. I had times where if I was just sitting and watching a bunch of TV like I used to do a lot of the time, I would just get an enormous amount of food, too much for me, and not even an amount that I really wanted to eat or needed to eat. I just ate it because I was able. Or if I was sad about something, food made me feel better. It was something that I coped with, and it was something that kind of helped me out in this situation. Or if I was anxious about something, nervous about something, anxious about how people thought of me, I would kind of go to food because I was able to use food as that thing to help me cope with whatever was stressing me out in my life. But I don't want you to confuse this with just overeating. So let me describe some of the differences that I've found between overeating and binge eating. See, overeating is something that might happen rarely. So let's say that you go to Chili's, some people's favorite restaurant for whatever reason, and you go there and you get the 2 for $20, right? You might be on a date and the 2 for $20, a great deal. If you want to do that, by all means. But when I would get the 2 for $20, I would just get it for myself. So let's say that you got the 2 for $20 deal for yourself. You've got a couple entrees for yourself, you got an appetizer, maybe a dessert, and you eat that food. And you don't do this often, but you said, oh, well, I'm just really hungry right now. Let me take it in. You take it in, and you're around other people, and you eat that food, and you might joke about feeling really full, but you're not really disgusted about the situation. It's not something that occurs often. It's just you took in a lot of food and you joke and you say, man, I'm so full. I can't believe I had that. But binge eating is a little different. Binge eating is something that is a bit more rapid in this case. So it's something that, because of some feeling, it's a bit more spur of the moment, and you tend to take in a bunch of this food, but it's something that you're not really proud of because it's usually something that you do by yourself when you tend to binge eat. And after you do this binge eating, the first reason you do it is because you eat a bunch of this delicious food, and then let's say for me, it's a big thing of freshly made cookies or a tray of brownies. And you take those in and you eat it all and you feel this immediate pleasure because, man, this food's so good. It's really hitting what I needed it to. And that turns into almost an instant regret. You feel basically like you did something wrong all of a sudden. And it's because for some people, binge eating feels like this compulsion. It feels like something that comes over you that you just have to kind of, for lack of better words, feed that need, you know? And with overeating on this side, if you feel disgusted or inside that internal voice, that monologue that you have tells you, oh man, I feel disgusted, I should shut this off. With binge eating, that same voice is going, it's like, oh man, I'm disgusted, I should shut this off. And then you just keep eating and you keep gorging on these foods and you feel just really disgusted. And that's the big difference between these two, is it's something that you kind of hide away from everybody and you eat all this food just to try to work with the feelings of sadness or boredom or anger or anxiety or whatever it is. You try to use food as that thing that tends to comfort you. And the big thing with this is you don't really want to talk about it with anybody. You feel ashamed. I would do this with pizza. You know, pizza was one of those things I would go get myself. I wouldn't be doing any sports at the time. I wouldn't be doing anything, hanging out with anybody. I didn't have lots of friends, so I wouldn't be hanging out with anybody. And I would order some big pizza, like a family pizza, whatever you want to call it. Just something fully loaded, get all the calories to it. I would get that, I would bring it back, I would sit down and I would eat the whole thing pretty rapidly. And I would regret that decision. So anybody else in my life who was going to come over to the house or do anything like that, I would make sure to hide the boxes from whatever I got, whether it was a family lasagna that you get at the grocery store, or whether it was a couple pizzas, or whether it was a bunch of entrees from a restaurant, or just multiple bags of chips, sodas, whatever. I would take it and I would hide it away because I felt ashamed of what I had done. And this isn't the case for everybody to feel ashamed, but for a lot of us, we don't want to feel like that this is some weakness that has come over us. And even in the fitness field, I didn't want to feel, I felt like a fraud. I felt like I wasn't really displaying what I wanted my clients or anybody else to do. So I felt like a complete fraud and a failure when I did those things, but it just kept coming back up and coming back up. But not to ramble, I want to talk to you about the ways that I was able to cope with it. Kind of three kind of keys that I worked on to help me figure out how to cope with this binge eating that I would tend to do, and how hopefully it can help you as well. The first one is recognizing hunger. Now, I know that's something that seems second nature. Oh, your body just tells you when you're hungry. But when you binge eat or you overeat constantly, which turns into binge eating, you don't really have that same sense of the immediate hunger and then the immediate I'm full. It's a little more just kind of wavy and you might just eat whenever. So recognizing hunger has been a big thing for me, and the way that I do that is I use something called the 10-minute rule. What I do with the 10-minute rule is, let's say I had some meal at somebody's house, it was a small meal on a plate. What I would do before I would go up and get any more food, I would set a timer for 10 minutes. Or I'd look at a clock and wait till 10 minutes went by. And if after those 10 minutes, I felt like I needed a little more, then I would get up, I would get just a little bit more of something, try to keep it healthier, on the healthier side for that second portion. And then I would apply the same rule. And that's usually the amount of time that it takes for your body to kind of register, oh, well, we really are full, or for all those feelings to really come through to tell you how much food you've actually taken on. how much you still feel like you need, or if you're tapped out. So try that 10-minute rule for that bit. It's helped me out. The second bit is to clean up your environment. A lot of things in binge eating or excessive overeating tend to be because we have these things around the house. We have these bags of chips, we have this lasagna, we have these things on standby for these situations, or we know the patterns that happen when we're about to go and when we're about to eat. And we need to think about these in the sense of just working on your environment that's right around you, in your house, in your cabinets, in your fridge. If you're going to go out and have these things with friends on rare occasions, that's okay. I don't want you to cut it out completely. If you want to have some delicious foods, you can go out and have them. It's just how much you have them and the reasons behind having those foods. So a good way for me to think about it is when I think about the foods in my house, I focus on macronutrients. If you haven't heard of those, it's a good thing to Google, and you should look up about it. It's basically proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. And it's the balance that your body needs for those to eat the right amounts of all of those so that you actually have whole meals and that it's not just heavy on the carbs or heavy on the fats or too heavy on protein. It's an actual balanced meal that actually keeps you satiated and keeps you feeling full enough to wait and go on with your day, to not always be thinking about binge eating. The third bit is to be less boring. And I'm talking to you when I say this. Be less boring. Why I say that is because boredom is one of those keys that I talked about that leads to the excessive overeating, that leads to binge eating. And so a couple things that we could do is we could look for some mental activities, right? Look for something that stimulates you mentally, where it's not just you zoning out completely, and find those good, easy ones, because when people feel this need to binge eat, it's usually because they're bored or they've had a long day at work or school or whatever. Try yoga, try reading, people who know me, they know that I read at the pace of The Cat and the Hat by Dr. Seuss. They know I read at that pace, but I don't care. That's okay for me. I take in my words and read them very carefully. How about that? It could be yoga, it could be reading, and it's the perfect point to try some type of new hobby. Something that keeps you stimulated on your brain to not have you focus on that binge eating type effort. And if you focus on all the things that I talked about today, really consider if you're on that overeating side or you might fall into that binge eating side. And focus on some of the coping mechanisms. Remember to recognize hunger using the 10-minute rule, clean up your environment, focusing on macronutrients and thinking about having something balanced all over the board instead of just binge eating for a week and then trying to crash diet for a week. Your body's not going to adjust to either of those, and it's going to bring havoc to your digestive system. So you need to find something that can be more consistent. The third bit is just to be less boring. Go out, do something, figure out a new hobby. No time like the present. Carpe diem, Thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys being here with me to discuss this and also talk about how this has affected me in my life. If you have any questions, you can always send them through my social media at Foss Movement Training or at the Coach So You Know. But otherwise, take chances, make mistakes, and be less bored. Talk to you soon.